A few videos ago, I said that Amtrak long distance lines, or lines that are 750 miles or more in length, should be kept. However, I made perhaps a surprising take for a pro rail YouTube channel, which is that I do not favor massive expansion of these long distance lines. So, of course, the first Amtrak proposal I made after that video is a proposed long distance Amtrak line. I might just be contradicting myself. Or maybe I've changed my mind. Or maybe I feel that this line is so necessary that I'm willing to make an exception. As to which of the three it is, you decide. The line proposal I'm talking about today is the restoration of a previous long distance Amtrak service called the North Coast Hiawatha. Good gosh, I hope the internet gave me the correct pronunciation for Hiawatha, as well as for the, six other names I had to look up how to pronounce. In any event, the Hiawatha was a tri weekly line that ran between Chicago, Illinois, and Seattle, Washington. You might be thinking to yourself, wait a second. Isn't there already a line that runs between Chicago and Seattle? There is, the Empire Builder. But this North Coast Hiawatha took a different path between Chicago and Seattle. But notice that I'm speaking in the past tense. This used to be a line, but it is no longer a line. That's because it fell victim to massive budget cuts to Amtrak in 1979, in no small part thanks to a push from United States Transportation Secretary Brock Adams to cut Amtrak's network significantly. This push for cuts happened at the same time that there was an oil shock that actually increased Amtrak's ridership. If you think that sounds like a bad idea, I think it's as bad as it sounds. Congress ultimately softened the harshness of the cuts, but the Hiawatha was still cut. There have been pushes to get this route restored in subsequent decades. But what are the stops on this route, and why would there be a push to restore this service? I'll first start by outlining the stops on this route. There are a lot of stops, so to keep this video from going over half an hour, I'm only going to list the stops that would be served by this line, but is already served by the Empire Builder. Then, I will talk in greater detail about the cities that would only be served by a restored Hiawatha. The cities on the eastern end of the route that would serve the restored Hiawatha route, in addition to the current Empire Builder, are as follows: Chicago and Glenview in Illinois, Milwaukee, Columbus, Portage, Wisconsin Dells, Toma, and La Crosse in Wisconsin, Winona, Red Wing, St. Paul, St. Cloud, Staples, and Detroit Lakes in Minnesota, and Fargo in North Dakota. But it's beyond Fargo where this proposed restoration differentiates from the Empire Builder. That's because this is where the Empire Builder goes on to serve the northern parts of North Dakota and Montana, while the Hiawatha served, and would serve, the southern parts of both states. The first stop west of Fargo would be in Valley City, with a population of over 6,500 people. The following stop would be in Jamestown, with a population of close to 16,000 people. Jamestown is also a great city for all things Buffalo. And no, I'm not talking about the city or the wings. Like, there is a Buffalo Museum there, and the world's largest buffalo is apparently there. Or at least the world's largest buffalo sculpture. The world's largest buffalo animal is probably in the wild somewhere. There would then be a stop in Bismarck, the capital city of North Dakota. It is the second largest city in the state, meaning that the restored Hiawatha route would be serving the two largest cities in the state, in Bismarck and Fargo. By the way, the picture I'm showing is actually the state capitol building in Bismarck. It's one of the more bizarre looking state capitol buildings I've seen. Across the Missouri River from Bismarck is the city of Mandan, which is the next stop. It has a population of just over 24,000 residents, making it the eighth largest city in North Dakota. The following stop would be in Dickinson, the seventh largest city in North Dakota. It's a city of over 25,000 residents. The train then crosses the border into Montana, and the first Montana city this line would serve is Glendive. It has a population of about 4,800 residents. The following stop would be at Miles City, which has about 8,400 residents. There would then be a stop at Forsyth, which had just over 1,600 residents as of 2020. It's a small place, but it was served by the original Hiawatha, and I'm not sure I could bring myself to keep this out of plans for a renewed Hiawatha, despite losing 900 people from its population since the 1980s. The next stop, heading west, would be in Billings. It is the largest city in Montana, with 117,000 residents. Apparently, Billings was founded as a railroad town too. Between the population and the rich history of rail, it is a disgrace that Billings has no Amtrak service. Restoring this old long distance line would address that disgrace. West of Billings, I would have a stop at Laurel. This is a proposed stop that wasn't part of the previous North Coast Hiawatha service. But the city has grown a fair bit in recent decades, now having over 7,200 residents. After passing through Quebec, the following stop would be in Livingston, with a population of just above 8,000 residents. This is another rail town at heart, being founded because of the Northern Pacific Railway. I find it equal parts fascinating and sad that places founded as rail towns have passenger rail service yanked from them against their will. Also sad is some of the other larger Montana cities that don't have Amtrak service. Cities such as Bozeman, the fourth largest city in Montana. They would also be served by this line. With a population of about 53,000, it has nearly doubled in population size in just the past 20 years. Bozeman is also home to Montana State University, the largest university in Montana. Anytime you are stopping in a city with a lot of college students, you are massively increasing your ridership base. Just saying. The following stop would be in Belgrade, another city that didn't have Amtrak service with the North Coast Hiawatha. Which is understandable, given that Belgrade had 1,300 residents in the early 1970s when Amtrak was founded. But now it has over 10,000 residents and is more than deserving of a stop. The following stop would be in Butte, with a population of just under 35,000 residents. This is the fifth largest city in Montana. It also has a storied history of mining, unions, and socialist politics. Someone might not typically associate Montana with socialism, but there you have it. The next stop would be at Deer Lodge, which had just under 3,000 residents as of 2020. Then I'd have a stop at Missoula, the second largest city in Montana. It has a population of over 73,000 and is rapidly growing. It's also home to the University of Montana. Not as large as Montana State in terms of student population, but it's a pretty sizable university in its own right. The train then travels through Paradise. It used to have an Amtrak stop with a previous iteration of the Hiawatha, but I don't propose Amtrak service here due to its small population size. I would appreciate it if someone in the comment section could enlighten me as to why this place had a stop, because I wasn't able to find anything in my research. Was it just for the giggles of saying that you are taking the train to Paradise, or that you'll be getting off at Paradise? If the goal is to make people giggle, Amtrak should propose a new long distance service that has Paradise, Montana as the western terminus and Hell, Michigan as the eastern terminus. St. Peter, Minnesota can be an intermediate stop, and a gate at St. Peter, Minnesota can be called the Pearly Gates. Amtrak can call my proposed service the Afterlife Express. Okay, I've gotten off track with these afterlife jokes. Now I should turn my attention back to the matter at hand, which is the North Coast Hiawatha service. The train would then continue on toward Sandpoint, Idaho, at which point the line would join with the Empire Builder once again. and run on the same tracks as the Empire Builder trains all the way to Seattle. This would include stops at Spokane, Ephrata, Winnetachee, Leavenworth, Everett, and Edmonds before arriving in Seattle. This differs from some of the other plans for a restored Hiawatha service, which has it going down into southern Washington to serve places like Pasco and Yakima before heading northwest towards Seattle. But places like Pasco and Yakima need not worry, because I have a different idea for how to serve these cities. It's the subject of another video. Now that I've outlined the nature of the restored line, I ask everyone to press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more content on imagining better rail transit in the United States. Now, back to the video. Now it's time to judge this line on 5 criteria. Oh, wait. Maybe I shouldn't grade this long distance line the same way I grade the shorter distance ones. In fact, I'm going to try something new with this Amtrak proposal video, which is to ditch grading altogether and instead talk about why this line should exist, the challenges that could make it difficult to exist, and my final verdict on how likely this line is to come into existence in the next 50 years. First and foremost, the line should exist because it would serve some of the most populous parts of North Dakota and Montana. Plain and simple. The current route through this part of the country, the Empire Builder, serves some of the more heavily populated parts of North Dakota, where it serves Grand Forks, Minot, and Williston in addition to serving Fargo. Thus, it serves 4 of the 6 largest cities in that state, including the largest, Fargo. But it also misses some other cities in North Dakota the restored Hiawatha service would serve, namely Bismarck, Mandan, and Dickinson. These are 3 of the 8 largest cities in the state, and the only city in that state larger than Bismarck is Fargo, a city the restored Hiawatha would also serve. But the Empire Builder completely avoids the most populous parts of Montana. It only serves one of Montana's 10 largest municipalities, and that municipality is Havre, which comes in at number 10. Which doesn't say a lot, because Montana isn't a super populous state to begin with. On the other hand, a restored Hiawatha would serve most of Montana's largest cities. Belgrade, its 8th largest city. Butte, its 5th largest city. Bozeman, its 4th largest city. Missoula, its 2nd largest city. And Billings, its largest city. The Empire Builder's avoidance of Montana's largest cities is not a criticism of the route. It's just a fact that it wasn't made to serve these cities. The Hiawatha was made to serve most of the state's larger cities, and it was wrongfully cut. What makes the absence of this service particularly upsetting is that it leaves some cities with a rich history of rail without any passenger rail service. Places like Billings and Livingston basically came into being thanks to rail, and yet have no passenger rail service. This upsetting fact also brings in some nuance to the conversation around whether sparsely populated parts of the United States should have rail service. The nuance is that, while the regions as a whole may be sparsely populated, there are densely populated pockets within these sparsely populated regions. Pockets with a rich history of rail that should absolutely be respected and honored. A secondary argument I have in favor of the line is that it is a great rail trip line. When the North Coast Hiawatha existed, it was considered to be one of the most beautiful rail lines in the United States. And while I never traveled through this part of the country, glances on Google Maps near where the line would be really showed me why it was considered so beautiful. I mean, just wow. Even some of the cities you pass on by have charm to it. Like this area around what would be the Missoula station, the retro train station feel, the mountains in the background. Just so charming. Road tripping is a thing, but so should rail tripping. And rail tripping through this part of the US should definitely be a thing. A third argument I'll make is that a lot of people are likely to make use of this line to actually travel long distances. If the data from the Sibling Empire Builder service is anything to go off of, there's going to be significant demand for long distance travel along the line's path, meaning that going exclusively with shorter distance lines along this corridor might not make sense. I think these are all arguments in favor of restoring this former long distance line. One challenge, however, is the current occupant of the White House, as well as the current transportation secretary, neither of whom have a track record of being supportive of Amtrak. The fact that the current executive branch isn't particularly pro Amtrak isn't helpful for the future of this line, especially since long distance lines are made possible through federal funding. However, in all due fairness, the line hasn't been restored under presidential administrations either ambivalent to or supportive of rail transit. And if the executive branch isn't enough to derail this idea, there are some in the legislative branch who believe that Amtrak should make a profit, or at least draw even. That mindset is not good news for a proposed route like the Hiawatha. As the sibling of this proposed service, the Empire Builder is a line that loses a lot of money. A restoration of the Hiawatha might be a tough sell. After all, a huge part of why this line was cut in the first place was because the transportation secretary at the time believed that the Hiawatha was too much of a money pit. Staying on the topic of the legislative branch, there's also the slight issue that Montana's congressional delegation is split on whether this line should be restored. Congressman Ryan Zinke is opposed to it. Congressman Troy Downing had no comment. Senator Tim Sheehy was receptive, and Senator Steve Daines was openly supportive. Without a unified front from Montana's delegation, I don't know how far this proposal would go. It's not all doom and gloom, though. The Federal Railroad Administration long distance rail study results, which interestingly was released right before Trump took office in January, propose a restoration of the route between Chicago and Seattle that's the same as my proposal, with the exception of the portion in Washington state. So, there are legit professionals who believe that such a line should exist again. So, even if opinions are mixed about the proposed route in Montana's congressional delegation, and even if the current occupant of the White House might not be the most supportive of expanding passenger rail, at least there's a concept in place when there are politicians more supportive of restoring the rail service. But how likely is it that this line will come into existence in the next 50 years? I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10 chance that this will come into existence in the next half century. The tracks are there, the advocacy is there, and the Federal Railroad Administration study supporting the existence of the route is there. There's a lot more going for this line proposal than most proposals. But who knows where we'll be politically in 4 years, let alone 50. And besides, the opinion of Montana's congressional delegation is mixed, as I highlighted earlier. That mixed opinion does not inspire confidence for me. Overall, I give it a good, but not perfect, chance that this line will exist in 2075. Is my likelihood assessment correct? I'd like to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Thank you, and have a good day.